It had been building for months. The tension, the snide remarks, the stares across the floor, each one more loaded than the last. Chuck Schumer had been the architect of so many setbacks, so many roadblocks in the Senate. And today, it was all about to come crashing down. I could feel it in the air, that familiar buzz before a storm. There was something different about the way Donald Trump was walking into the room, his face set with that unmistakable grimace. This wasn't just another day of politics. This was something far worse for Schumer. I was standing near the back, watching as Trump took his place at the front of the press conference. He didn't even wait for the usual pleasantries. It was like a switch had been flipped in him. His eyes, usually calm and measured, were now fiery with a rage that he couldn't seem to control. "Senator Schumer," he said, his voice cold and piercing, "I've tried to be patient, tried to reason with you. But you've pushed too far this time." Schumer stood stiffly, his face contorting in the way it always did when he knew he was about to take a public hit. His jaw tightened, but there was no hiding the panic in his eyes. He could feel it too, the final blow was coming. Trump wasn't done. "You've sabotaged every single piece of legislation we've tried to push forward. And for what? Your own political gain. You've made a career out of blocking progress for the American people just to score points. Well, guess what, Chuck? Your game is over." The room went still. You could hear the collective breath of the reporters, waiting for the fallout. But what happened next, it took everyone by surprise. Trump stepped closer to the podium, his fingers gripping the edge as if he were about to launch into a full-on attack. The tension was palpable, every word hanging in the air like a weapon. "Chuck," he continued, his voice cutting through the room, "you thought you could play these games with me. You thought you could keep blocking everything I put forward and just get away with it. Well, you're wrong." Schumer's face paled, but he kept his composure, trying to maintain that practiced political mask he wore so well. He cleared his throat, but Trump wasn't about to let him speak. "Don't bother with your speeches, Chuck. We've all heard them before. You're just a puppet for the far-left agenda. You don't care about the people of this country, you only care about your own power." Trump's words were like a slap to the face, each one landing with the precision of a surgical strike. Schumer's eyes flickered, a subtle but undeniable sign that he was rattled. He took a step back, but Trump pressed forward, moving closer to him, his finger now pointing directly at the Senate Minority Leader. "I've had enough of your lies. Enough of your smears. Enough of your little games. This is the end for you, Chuck. I'm done playing nice." There was a brief silence before Schumer finally spoke, but his voice wavered slightly, betraying his confidence. "You think you can intimidate me with your tantrums? You think you can? I don't have to intimidate you, Chuck," Trump cut him off, his voice rising. "I just have to expose you for what you really are. And that's exactly what I'm going to do." Trump's words echoed in the chamber, and you could almost feel the weight of them bearing down on Schumer. The room was dead silent as everyone waited for what would come next. Trump wasn't finished yet. The intensity in his eyes was unwavering, and he knew exactly where to strike. His words sliced through the tension like a blade. "You've been at this for years, Chuck, hiding behind your speeches, pretending to be a voice for the people. But the truth is, you're nothing more than a career politician who's failed to deliver on every promise. You've done nothing but tear this country apart with your divisiveness." Schumer's face twisted in anger, but the deeper he tried to push back, the more Trump's words seemed to cut through him. The room had never felt colder, more charged with an electric intensity. The reporters were on edge, hanging on every syllable, knowing this was no ordinary political fight. Trump looked directly at Schumer, his gaze unyielding. "You've sold out the American people, Chuck. You've traded your integrity for power. And now it's time for you to pay the price." It wasn't just a public scolding anymore. Trump had opened the floodgates. The crowd could feel the shift, the end was near for Schumer. Trump had brought the war to the front lines, and Schumer was losing. "You think you can hold on to your seat? Your position. Trump continued. You're a dinosaur, Chuck. And the age of dinosaurs is over. Schumer's posture faltered slightly, and he quickly straightened up, trying to regain control of the situation. But it was clear to everyone in the room, Trump had exposed him. Every word Trump spoke landed like a thunderclap, echoing in Schumer's mind. The fight was no longer in his favor. And then, Trump delivered the final blow. Tomorrow, I'm releasing everything. The emails, the deals, the under-the-table negotiations. I'm pulling the curtain back. And this time, there's nowhere to hide. The room seemed to hold its breath as Trump's words echoed off the walls. Schumer's face drained of color as the weight of what Trump had just said settled over him. He had heard rumors, whispers, but to hear it said out loud, publicly, in front of the cameras, was a different thing entirely. You can't do this, Schumer finally managed, his voice thin and shaky, an attempt at regaining control. You'll destroy the Senate. You'll ruin everything. Trump held up a hand, cutting him off. Don't even try, Chuck. I'm done listening to you and your excuses. This isn't about the Senate, it's about accountability. It's about stopping people like you who think they can run roughshod over this country for their own gain. It's about making sure the truth finally gets out. Schumer's eyes flickered, an unmistakable hint of panic creeping into his expression. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had thought he could handle this. He had always prided himself on his ability to talk his way out of a corner, but this was different. Trump wasn't giving him an inch. The cameras flashed as the room went still, hanging on every second of this extraordinary confrontation. Schumer tried to regain his composure, forcing himself to take a deep breath. But Trump wasn't finished. You're a crook, Chuck. Everyone knows it. And tomorrow, the world will see it too. Trump's voice was like a hammer, driving the nail of truth deeper into Schumer's already crumbling defense. I have the receipts. Every backdoor deal you've made, every shady move you've tried to pull. Tomorrow, it's all coming out. Schumer's eyes narrowed, but it was clear the fight had gone out of him. He could feel the walls closing in. The room was buzzing with the reality of what was happening. The clock was ticking on Schumer's political career, and there was nothing he could do to stop the inevitable. Trump turned to face the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the reporters, his face smug with the certainty of victory. I suggest you all be ready for tomorrow, he said with a sharp smile. It's going to be a spectacle. The silence that followed Trump's words was deafening. It was as if the entire room had collectively exhaled a breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. No one knew exactly how to react. No one could predict what was coming next. But one thing was clear, Schumer's time had come. The reporters exchanged glances, their fingers hovering over cameras and microphones, unsure of whether to jump in or to stay silent. Schumer stood motionless, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He had been in politics long enough to know the gravity of Trump's threat. But to have it laid out so plainly, so publicly, it was a blow he wasn't prepared for. Trump leaned in slightly, his voice dropping into an almost conspiratorial tone. I'm not here to play games anymore, Chuck. This is it. The American people are tired of your lies, your games, your stalling. You can't hide behind the Senate floor anymore. Tomorrow, you'll be exposed for who you really are. Schumer's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He was grasping for control, but it was slipping through his fingers. His political career, his legacy, it was all crumbling, right there, under the spotlight. Trump took a step back, letting the moment linger, his eyes still fixed on Schumer. There was no fear, no hesitation. He knew he had won this round. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. With that, Trump turned and walked away from the podium, the sound of his footsteps loud in the hushed room. The cameras continued to flash, but it felt almost secondary now. Trump had delivered his blow, and nothing would ever be the same. Schumer stood frozen for a moment, his entire world shifting beneath him. Then, he slowly looked up at the gathered reporters, but he had no words left. His power had evaporated. Trump had taken the air out of the room, and the fight out of Schumer. The next day arrived, and the media was in a frenzy. Headlines screamed about Trump's bombshell announcement, each one more sensational than the last. The world was waiting for the revelations to come to light, and the anticipation was electric. But as the hours ticked by, Schumer remained eerily silent, his team scrambling behind closed doors, working frantically to contain the fallout. Inside the Senate, it was as if time had frozen. Senators and staffers whispered in the halls, trying to make sense of what was coming. Schumer's usual bravado had vanished, replaced by a palpable sense of panic. He had tried to ignore the growing whispers, but now, with every tick of the clock, he could feel the ground slipping further from under him. He knew that Trump had the upper hand, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Around midday, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally came. A press conference was called. Trump, standing at the podium, looked more confident than ever, a gleam of victory in his eyes. Behind him, the large screen flickered to life, displaying a series of damning documents, emails, confidential reports, and shady deals, all laid bare for the world to see. Trump's voice was steady as he began his statement. Today, the truth is finally coming out. What you've all heard, what Chuck Schumer has been hiding, has been exposed. The images on the screen were damning. Evidence of backroom deals with lobbyists, emails detailing underhanded negotiations, and even leaked recordings of private conversations. It was clear now that Schumer had been playing a dangerous game of deceit, and Trump was the one who had finally brought it all to light. Chuck Schumer, Trump continued, has made a career out of exploiting the American people for his own gain. And today, we end that. The people of this country deserve better, and it's time for the Senate to be held accountable. The camera shifted to Schumer's office, where the once confident leader sat hunched over, surrounded by aides who were desperately trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. The weight of the scandal was crushing him. The walls were closing in. It was the final blow, and Schumer knew it. He had no more defense, no more tricks to play. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were chaos. Schumer's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Once a powerful figure in the Senate, he now found himself cornered, his political career crumbling before the public eye. The media buzzed incessantly about his exposed secrets, the once proud leader now the subject of late-night jokes and bitter headlines. Trump, on the other hand, was riding high. The press conferences, the rallies, the social media, everything was turning in his favor. He had delivered the knockout punch, and the aftermath of Schumer's scandal was like a tidal wave of victory that washed over him. His supporters rallied behind him, praising his ability to uncover the truth, while his opponents scrambled to distance themselves from Schumer. It wasn't just Schumer who was affected. The entire Senate was left in disarray. Calls for resignations came from all sides as senators reeled from the impact of Trump's revelation. The balance of power was shifting, and Schumer was at the epicenter of the storm. Behind closed doors, Schumer's political allies distanced themselves one by one. They had no choice. The scandal had destroyed everything he had worked for, and they were too afraid to be associated with the wreckage. His calls went unanswered, his pleas for support ignored. But perhaps the most painful blow came from his own party. In a stunning turn of events, the Senate Majority Leader publicly called for Schumer to step down, citing the irreparable damage he had caused. The very people who had once supported him were now turning their backs. Schumer's isolation was complete. On the evening of what would become his final public appearance, Schumer stood at a podium, his face etched with exhaustion and regret. He addressed the press, but it was clear the battle was over. He had no defense left. No explanation that could undo the damage. His career was finished. "I've made mistakes," Schumer said, his voice shaky. "And I'll take responsibility for them. But I never intended for it to end like this." But the truth had already been made clear. The media, the public, and Trump had already rendered their judgment. Schumer's final blow had landed, and there was no coming back from it. Trump, watching from his office, smiled. The victory was his. The Senate had just witnessed the final unraveling of one of its most powerful players, and he had been the one to make it happen. And as Schumer's career faded into the history books, Trump stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The game had changed forever.